Welcome to this evening's meeting of Medway Council's Audit Committee, 29th of November 2023. Are there any apologies for absence? I haven't received any. No? Can I sign a record of the previous meeting of this committee? Was it the 28th of September as correct, please? Thank you. Are there any urgent matters rising this evening? I haven't got any. No urgent matters. Any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests, please? No no declarations of interest. I'd like now to welcome Andy to introduce the Interim Auditor's Annual Report and to welcome Darren to the meeting as well, please.
Just making sure it's still on. Thank you, Chair. So the report here presents the interim findings of the Council's external auditors, Grant Thornton, their audit of the Council's arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the use of resources during 2022-23. The report also gives a background to the previously reported delays relating to the publishing and audit of the financial statements against statutory deadlines. It's worth mentioning the 2020-21 audit has now been concluded and an audit certificate has been issued. Section 4 details the proposals to clear the national backlog of outstanding audits. Medway has published a set of draft statements for 2021-22 and expects to publish draft statements for 22-23 by the end of February 2024. Paragraph 4.4 details the proposed approach to clearing the backlog by 31st March 2024, and that this timescale would mean it's not possible to complete the audits. Instead, it's proposed that this time is used to prepare for the 2023-24 financial statements to ensure they can be prepared and audited within the statutory deadlines which are laid out in the report. Section 5 on page 16 gives an update on the value for money audit, and with that I'm going to hand over to Darren to give an update on the progress of that.
Thank you, Andy. So I'll just say a few words just to put the report into context, and then I'm happy to pick up any questions that you may have. So I hope the format and the content of the report are familiar to you. It gives our views on your arrangements to ensure your financial sustainability, that you've got proper governance arrangements in place, and that you can secure the best use of the money at your disposal on behalf of the public. For financial sustainability, we've concluded that there's a significant weakness in your arrangements, and that's driven by the overspend you incurred in 22-23, the forecast overspend in 23-24 of 12 million, and also acknowledging the financial gap that your own medium-term financial plan forecasts for 24-25 of 38 million, rising to 71 million to 27-28. So that is indeed a challenging gap to fill, but it's against the fact that your level of reserves are such that you have little flexibility to manage this gap. Now, unfortunately, your position's not unique, and as I was coming over to you tonight, I heard of a council that's just issued a Section 114 notice, and that's a growing number of councils that are facing a tipping point on their ability to ensure their financial sustainability for the medium term. We note the positive steps that you're taking, but nevertheless we've made two key recommendations. Firstly, urgently to address the 23-24 financial forecast overspend, and critically to establish at pace a pathway to secure the medium-term financial sustainability of the council. And then secondly, to introduce separate monitoring of savings proposals to ensure that you're clear where you intend to make savings, you actually deliver those on the ground, along with scenario planning for the medium-term financial plan, identifying your worst, your best outcome or the most likely outcome. For governance, we recognise the action that's been taken against audit recommendations from previous years, and that's positive. The significant weakness that we did conclude does reflect the production of financial statements for 21-22 and 22-23. And that's akin to the position that we reported to you last year. For the economy, efficiency and effectiveness aspect, in previous years we concluded there was a significant weakness in arrangements in respect of children's social services, and that was based on the Ofsted inspections. And Ofsted has reported that the council's investment in its services and its improvement work has improved the delivery of those services, and that's allowed us to conclude, in the absence of any other weaknesses, that there are no significant weaknesses for economy, efficiency and effectiveness. I'll pause there and I'm happy to pick up any questions that members may have.
Thank you both. Sorry, Councillor Gullivan, Councillor Hackwell, I'll just take them in alphabetical order if you don't mind.
Happy with that. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like a further explanation about what it says in section 4.4 and what are the practical implications of not delivering those two outstanding audits. Because it seems strange to me that we could just walk away from that without any implications. So I'd like to know what those implications are, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure Darren will add to my comments, but it's really about being pragmatic. The statutory deadlines are a hard stop. So if we haven't concluded the audits and the auditor find themselves in a position to give a definite opinion at that point, we could end up with what's known as a disclaimer opinion anyway. And I think just given the resourcing implications we've got, the issues that we're wrestling with as an authority at the moment, diverting resources to pursue something that I just think we haven't got a prayer of delivering anyway. A pragmatic view is just to say, look, let's not waste time and effort on it and take disclaimer opinion. And we agonised about whether that was something we should ask the council and the authority to decide upon, but actually that would be deciding to do something that's, you know, in contravention of statute. So we didn't think we could do that. This is just us taking a pragmatic view, I think, but Darren and I spoke about it and concluded that we would be wasting a lot of time and resources on both sides pursuing something that we were never going to be able to deliver.
So what are the consequences to the authority, please? So
the consequences are that we get a disclaimer opinion, so we don't get a full, either a qualified or unqualified audit for those two sets of accounts. The other practical implication is that the audit of the 23-24 accounts can't be conducted until sufficient work has been done by the auditor to satisfy themselves of the brought forward balances from those. So it won't be, we just forget about those 2 years and go straight to an audit of 23-24. There will need to be some prelim work before that so that the auditor can say that the opening balances that they're satisfied with. But it just means that we're not conducting 3 full audits, knowing that we're not going to end up with an opinion at the end of them.
So, we've been talking about Treasury management before this meeting. Will there be any likely implications to our creditworthiness for not doing that?
I don't think so. Not least because we won't be an outlier. There will be lots of authorities that find themselves in the same place as us, but they may have, tried to meet the deadlines and failed. Well, I think we're just taking a very, very pragmatic view that we're not going to waste the time and resources pursuing it, which, people will have views about that, but that's the view that I've come to in consultation with the auditor. I don't know, Darren, did you want to add to that?
I fully agree with the comments you've made, Phil. It is very much a pragmatic decision, and each and every authority with outstanding audits are having those discussions and reaching that judgment. You're not alone even in Kent, so there are a number in Kent that are in the same position. We're trying to make decisions in a sea of uncertainty because the government still hasn't determined when the statutory backstop will be. Our latest understanding is that it's the end of March, as the report states, but that is still subject to the government. They could turn around and say it's the end of September, and then perhaps if that were the case, there's another conversation to be had. But I do think, with what we know currently, that this is a sensible decision. What we don't know at the moment, and I don't think any firm has determined how to approach it, is the scope and depth of the work that would need to be undertaken on the opening balances. And there's no doubt that in itself will be a significant proportion of work. So it's not a case of there's no audit for 2 years, as Phil said. There will be a robust programme, but the shape and size of it at the moment, I'm unable to answer. Thanks, Darren.
Councillor Hackwell, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. My question was a very, very similar question originally on that, and I was interested to know who's given you authority to do that, and you've explained that no one's given you authority to do that, as in members. It's just something you've decided to do yourself. So I do sort of still struggling with that decision at the moment, whether that should have at least come to Cabinet or the Audit Committee or somewhere to get that permission before declaring that's what you're going to do. So I'm still struggling with that decision-making process. That's the first thing. The second thing, you mentioned that that we agreed, and I remember agreeing it, I think at one committee or another, that the fee would go up by 80,000 from 109,000 for Grantham for the external audit plan. Does that figure change if we're not going to have two audits? Why are we paying additional monies for part of the work that's not being done? So that's another question. And then going on about the risk that you put in place, I'd like to just stand there. We hear, and even last night at the Medway matters, we've got it down to 12 million now, and all the rest of it. We were at a worse position in round 2 last year. We were over 14 million predicted to be wrong, and last year's authority. So this 12 million is not anything new for round 2. It's something that we have been grappling with for years to try and reduce the overspend on the council. I mean, we had an unfortunate thing of requires improvement, and we spent a lot of money throwing at children's services to actually trying to get that back into a state, and that's borne fruit, and we've got it to good, So now the time is for maybe to look at children's services and saying, okay, like any problem, you throw money at it and you solve it. Once it's solved, you then start to look and pare it back, and how you can get it in a natural. So I think there's still lots of work to do, don't get me wrong, but this isn't anything unusual for any council. I am a little bit worried though that you're projecting that next year we're going to be 38 million overspent. The authority will be, the administration will have been in place for over a year. It would be their budget. They'll have to manage it. They can't keep saying this is the mess we've been left in. It will be their own mess. That we're now projecting will be 38 million, and that actually goes back by the end of the administration's run to be something like 72 million. So it's a very worrying statement that you're putting in your report, that the administration is seeing that our operating stance is going to get very, very bad. So could you give us a little bit of how we arrive at those numbers of 72 million by the end of the administration? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those questions. So the first one, you've kind of asked again, you're struggling with the decision that I've taken unilaterally in terms of the organisation. I did speak to the monitoring officer about this, and sort of the question was who and what should be making this decision. And the fact is, what we're deciding to do is in contravention of a statutory backstop. So I didn't think it was appropriate and right to ask a committee or a cabinet or a council to make that decision. I mean, what I should be doing is trying to get it over the line. I should be getting my statements published, and I will, and we will, get the auditor in and try and meet that statutory backstop. But with the best will in the world, Darren's got resourcing issues, he's got other customers that he's got to try and audit. I haven't got the resources, I've lost staff recently, and with the work that we're doing to try and address the financial situation that the council's in, I just haven't got the capacity to catch up on all of these accounts as well. So I'm taking a pragmatic view that I'm not wasting the resource doing it. Now, I don't know whether that opens me up to criticism, that I should be trying to make this happen when I know it. I just can't. I haven't got the resources to do it. So, but that's why I've taken the decision unilaterally. I can't ask you to make a decision that's in contravention of statute, really. That's the answer to the first question. In terms of the fees, I've absolutely had that conversation with Darren. So, I mean, my view is the fees are set for the 3 years of audit. If 2 of those audits we're not going to progress with under the sort of normal course of events, that I'm asking for basically a refund of those fees, but recognising that the cost of the 23-24 audit will be significantly more expensive than it would ordinarily, because there's this prelim work in terms of giving the auditor assurance of our brought forward balances. Now, as Darren says, he doesn't know at this stage what that work will entail and how much it will cost. That's a conversation that he and I will have in due course. But yes, it's a good question. I've asked it, and we'll have that conversation and feedback to the committee. And then in terms of the 12 million, you're right. We were in this position similar to this last year when we forecast at round 2 and round 3, sort of, I think it was 14, then 12. Those are the figures off the top of my head. The fact is, we did overspend though, and we overspent still by £6 million at year end. And because the budget had been underpinned by £5 million of reserves, that meant us using £11 million, almost half of the general reserves we had at the time. Now, even if this year we get to a position where the 12 million is halved and we overspend by 6 million, that puts us in a really dangerous position in terms of the level of reserve support we've got. So, yeah, we're working really hard to move that 12 million down, but every year it gets harder and harder. There's less slack in our budgets. There's less. I mean, I don't think we've ever had fat in our budgets for about 20 years, but that there is less and less we can do to move that forecast down. So I suspect we will overspend to some extent. Hopefully it won't be 12 million, but that'll still be a dent in our reserves that we really can't afford to bear, especially given what we're forecasting for next year. Just to finish that piece, at this stage of the year, we generally report a gap of that kind of level, and then over the sort of next couple of months, we'll be working with portfolio holders and senior officers to identify measures to close that gap. In fact, this year we've gone even further than that. We've got external support in to help us. We've got SIPFA coming in to look at what we do, what we spend, use their benchmarking tools to try and identify areas where we are spending above national averages and that sort of thing, to kind of target where our savings plans need to fall. But you know, obviously we are hopeful that by the time we get to February, we can report a balanced budget.
Councillor Goldman, I'm going to take Councillor Nestor off first and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, just I'm not sure if I can form them right. You just have to excuse me because I'm still new to this committee, I'm still trying to get my head around it. But so what kind of reserves do we currently have? That's the first question. Because it seems like previous years we were able to tap into these reserves when we get the deficit, but what you just said, it seems like we won't be able to do this year. And my second question is about the external audit plan for the next year. Do we have some plan timetable for that? Yeah, thank you.
In terms of the question around reserves, so at the end of 22-23, at the end of 22, we had non-earmarked general fund reserves of £26 million. At the end of 22-23, we needed 11 million of those to fund the budget and the overspend last year. We also had to set aside another 3 million into an earmark reserve in response to the safety valve programme that we're in for SEN expenditure. And there were a couple of other commitments that were made against reserves. So that reduced our non-earmarked general fund reserves to £10 million. That's what we had at the end of last financial year, so 22-23. In addition to that, we have some earmarked reserves. I think they're about 38 million. This is off the top of my head, so but it's there or thereabouts, about 38 million pound. Now they're for a range of things. So some of that represents Section 106 contributions. So they're quite ring fenced as to how we can use those reserves. Similarly, we've got grant funding that's been rolled forward through reserves. Again, there tends to be conditions and ring fences. So our ability to use that to bail out and overspend is limited. There are then reserves that we make to provide for future expenditure. So we've got an IT renewals fund, for example, where we put money aside to replace IT kit when the time comes. We've got a building repairs and maintenance fund, which is to set aside to maintain our... Neither of those are well, the IT renewals fund, that's probably enough. The building repairs and maintenance fund isn't enough but it's what we can afford. And, you know, we see the result of that in terms of being unable to maintain our buildings. But those reserves are there. We could declassify those and use them to fund overspends, but then you're just deferring the problem to later down the track, because we haven't got a sustainable position where we can fund future expenditure requirements. So the earmarked, obviously I try to protect for the purposes for which they're earmarked. So we've got the 10 million of non-earmarked reserves.
So does that mean to balance the book we need to borrow more, or what's?
We're not allowed to borrow to fund current expenditure, revenue expenditure. You can borrow for capital expenditure, but you can't borrow for revenue expenditure. Unless you go to the department for levelling up housing and communities and ask for a capitalisation directive because you're requesting exceptional financial support. Now, I don't want to be in that position. So,
Because I've heard it a lot of time this evening that a lot of councils are in the same boat. So I think the problem might be easily solved from above, like from the government, not from.
Darren, did you want to answer the second question for Councillor Nestor, please?
Thank you. So given that I said that there's a lot of uncertainty, but if you put that to one side, this whole concept of a backstop is meant to be a reset. So it should enable everyone to go back to a normal cycle. And that normal cycle would see us undertake the planning work for 23-24 March, with a view to present an audit plan to this committee in April or May, depending on your timing, and then to start the substantive work on the financial statements for 23-24 from July, with a view to finish on a normal cycle by the end of September.
And is that set out for all councils or just our council? Because in the report it said that some councils they have their reports backlogged to 2015, 2016. I mean.
Yes, so those councils that have audits incomplete from 15, 16 or earlier years, they will be closed by this statutory backstop, which we think will be the 31st of March 24. And that's the point where the audit would just be disclaimed. The auditor would say, we can't give an opinion on the accuracy and completeness of the financial statements. And it is worth knowing that a disclaimer does carry through to the current years that you're dealing with, but that's going to be a sector-wide issue.
Councillor Golden, you wanted to come in, and Councillor
Yes, please, Chair. I'd just like to reassure Darren. Phil mentioned the work that's going on with SIPFA. I had quite a long interview this afternoon with people from SIPFA. It was a very detailed discussion of where we are, how we've got to the present situation, and more importantly, how we go forward. So if that could reassure you, Darren, that the work is going, and certainly from my group's point of view, we will fully cooperate with that. And I made that point to SIPFA that we were determined to make sure that this authority is in a good position. So I think from what I've got this afternoon, that we can find a constructive way forward, and hopefully we can have a united approach towards that. So I hope that reassures you that going forward there is a huge commitment from this authority to make sure that things are as they should be.
Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back on reserves, I mean, if my memory serves me right, at the end of 22, we were going to take 4 million out of reserves. We ended up not taking that 4 million. We put another 4 million in, so we added to the reserves. And if we go back sort of 6 or 7 years, we didn't have any reserves at all. So being 10.5 or 10.155 million in reserves is actually, you know, compared with 7 years ago, is a very good position to be in. So I wouldn't like anybody to go away with the point that we've got no money in the bank. You know, we did act prudently, and it does go up and down over time. We have to use reserves. It's a bit like the current sayings we have. You know, you have to save for a rainy day, and when a rainy day comes, you have to spend some of that money to buy a new boiler or a new car or whatever you have to do. And we've been through a process of that. But So the reserves about 6 or 7 years ago were actually a lot lower than the 10.155 million that we've got at the moment. Is that correct? I'm still on.
Yes, that is correct. You know, it was part of the strategy to try and rebuild those reserves, and we did it using you recall the MRP. That I had plenty of discussions with the auditor about that one, but that did serve a purpose.
We need to explain TLAs because we've got new members.
Yes, sorry. So minimum revenue provision is the provision that we set aside in the revenue budget for the repayment of debt, and I got some work undertaken to demonstrate that we'd over-provided over a number of years. And I basically essentially washed that over-provision through the revenue accounts over a number of years, which gave us a benefit and allowed us to rebuild our reserves. But you're right, our reserves have been at a low level for a long time. It is a little bit frustrating that having built them up to the level that we got to, that last year we had to take such a hit on them. But it's not sustainable, and you know, we did it once. If we have to do it again this year, we're then running out of room beyond that.
Any other members? Okay, it's my turn now. I think this committee has always been seen to be taking a prudent approach on things. And I don't think that we have neglected that duty in any way. I'd just like to have some assurance from Darren that in his professional opinion and in the opinion of the industry at large, because I'm sure you talk to others, that the course of action that is being proposed and being taken by officers and your good selves is one that will bring us to not alone a rebate, but actually a saving in resource, both physical and financial, if we take this decision and you stick to the timetable that we hope is already agreed.
So I think your question's more in respect of the financial statements audit and the decision not to undertake the 2 years audit. I do. I think. I mean, this committee knows that the 2021 audit, for a number of reasons, was protracted. And I think even with the best will and desire from both sides to complete 21-22 on a much shorter, sharper time frame, even if we tried just to do 1 year, I think it would prove very difficult to complete by what's expected to be the end point of the 31st of March 24. So I think it is a pragmatic response. And if I felt otherwise, I would clearly say that to you.
I thank you for that. My further statements to this committee is I've met with SIPFA as well, and it is rigorous, and I'm meeting with them again tomorrow. Quite looking forward to that, actually, because what I've seen from the reports that Darren's firm has produced and from the suggestions in SIPSA, that we've been taking the recommendations that have been given to us and we're doing something about them. So I would hope that the committee is assured by those actions and that we can move forward on that. And I wouldn't say that we're going to have a mess at the end of anything, because we've got very professional officers. And the thing is that we will be in a difficult position, because if you start in a difficult position and we've got a challenging economic climate, we are still going to be in a difficult position. And I think our officers and our auditors and everybody in this room wants it to be a successful outcome for that. That's my... Sorry. I move the recommendation as, I move the recommendation at 1.1, page 15, that the committee notes the interim auditor's report at Appendix 1. Thank you.
Seconded.
Now we come on to the appointment of independent members. Darren, did you want to stay or did you want to come? Thank you very much. May I ask Wayne Hemingway to introduce the report for us, please?
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I'll just briefly go through the report for members. So back in June 2023, this committee reviewed terms of reference for the committee and asked officers to report back on possibility around the appointment of independent members. So members will be aware that the Audit Committee considered the proposal around independent members originally back in June 2021. At that point, the committee decided not to recommend to Council to appoint an independent member. In terms of this report we're presenting to you this evening, it's really an updated report from 2021. So at Section 4, we refer to the SIPFOR guidance from 2022, which really provides a strengthened guidance from SIPFOR around the appointment of independent members. Also, obviously, to point out in terms of recommendations for tonight, obviously it's for the committee to decide whether to recommend whether you wish to appoint an independent member to full council, and then in terms of if you do so, we would just look at things like obviously remuneration and also whether the member should be voting or non-voting. And with that, I will hand back to the chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Goulburn, followed by Councillor Hackwell.
I've thought long about this. If you look at it at one level, it would seem a sensible thing to do. But when you think a bit deeper, why are we in a position where we need to do this? What has changed? I mean, we have a team of very highly qualified, good quality finance officers. We have an audit, external auditor that is only too willing to give us help and guidance. What would an independent member of this audit committee actually bring to the table which we haven't got at the moment? I'm firmly of the belief that as elected politicians, we're the ones that have to carry the can, and we're the ones that have to make the decisions. Some of those decisions are not always easy to do, and obviously we need the full advice and recommendation and possible recommendations from our professional officers and indeed our auditors. Given the state of our finance, I can't see that this would be a investment that would give us much return. I would far sooner, personally, that instead of paying somebody else to sit on this table around us, that if there is anything money to be spent, it should be spent on training to make sure that all of us, as elected members sitting around this table, have in-depth knowledge in order to look at the council's affairs in depth. I think over a period of time, a lot of us have gained that experience, but even for those who have been here a long time, we can always learn more, and I'm absolutely certain that should always be the case. You know, I believe it does say in the terms of reference of the committee that we should have regular training. And I think that probably in the past we probably haven't had as, despite the being in the terms of reference, I don't think we probably have had enough training. But I can't see that, given this where we are at the moment with the council's finances, that this would actually be a good investment for our council's money.
Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I still haven't much changed my mind since 2021. I echo what Councillor Goldwyn said, that you know, I looked at the list, and the list is still about 50-50 of those that have independent members and those that don't. So it's not as though it's like we're an outlier. We're just one of the ones that don't have independent members. I feel quite comfortable in my time that I've sat on an audit committee that, you know, I read the papers thoroughly, I look at the numbers, I try and become objective to what I see. I'm not sure what an independent member will bring us apart from extra cost. And you know, if you're going to get someone who can do the job, they're not going to do it for nothing, I would have thought. You're not going to find a volunteer on the street. So I still think this audit committee does a good job, and I'm still think that the capability we have within this team should be able to do the job that's required us as elected members, as we do at many other committees. As elected members, we pore over the detail, we look at the numbers, we listen to the officers, we look at their reports, and we make our own conclusions. I'm not sure what an independent member will bring, so I still won't be supporting this tonight. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Nestor.
Thank you, Chair. Well, basically, my thoughts are similar. I mean, I would love to have an independent expert advising us, but at the same time, I don't think the council has the financial power to pay a person like that. Also, I'm not sure how comfortable I am this person to have voting rights. Since the person will be an expert and he'll give recommendations, obviously he's going to vote for their own recommendation every single time. So it kind of diminishes the idea of him having voting rights. So yeah, I'm not against it per se, but if we have this independent person sitting on this committee, I think they shouldn't have voting rights, and if we can get away with it, they shouldn't be paid. There are some examples that the council have these people and they are not paid, so it's not unheard of. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Bowen.
I just wanted to say, I don't think it's a bad idea, but yeah, if we can get away without paying them, and I agree that they shouldn't be have voting rights, but I agree with as much training as we can get is a great idea.
Well, I was very much against this originally, but we bring in people like SIPA for advice, we bring in other people for advice, we get recommendations from our auditors, and times change, and so opinions change. And what I've heard tonight, in fairness to everybody, is they don't know what this person will bring. Well, I don't know what tomorrow will bring until it comes. So my opinion is that we should actually try and bring in an extra person, and I do agree that they shouldn't have any voting rights. We have experts sitting in this room at the moment, they don't have voting rights. And the question around remuneration, from the figures I've seen here, the highest is under £1,000 per the year. Now, in the state of the budget that's in it, if we had somebody whom we paid £1,000 to, that gave us steer in some direction that saved us £2,000, I think that's very good value for money. And the other thing is, in the state that we find ourselves in, should we not go for both the training? A lot of the training costs actually a lot more than that, but it's still worthwhile having. And maybe somebody is altruistic and wants to do it for no money. But I don't know if we have to worry about how much that would go to the recruitment of the person. We're asked to agree it in principle whether we have a person. And if we do have them, do they have voting rights or no voting rights. And that's what's ahead of us tonight. Not to worry about whether we can get away with it or not, Councillor Nestroff. Thank you. We go to the Vice Chair? Shall I do it?
Would you like me to respond at all, Chairperson? So in the case of voting rights or non-voting rights, we just wanted to reflect the legislative position for you, but obviously we're giving you as a committee, should you choose to recommend to full council to appoint an independent member, whether this committee feels that member should have voting rights in certain circumstances. But I think the message is clear tonight that should such a member be appointed, it should be in a non-voting capacity, and that is absolutely fine. And with regards to remuneration, what we're asking here is that the independent remuneration panel would look at that as part of their what they're already doing, in fact, which is they look at members' allowances as well. So this would be kind of like tagged on, but of course they would have access to the same information we do in terms of our comparator authorities, etc., etc. So, but that would still be a matter for full council to determine at the end of the day, a bit like your own members' allowances as well. Thank you, Chairperson.
Councillor Nestroff has one more question. Thank you for the clarification, Wayne.
I'm just rereading through the documentation. I just have a quick question. So there was a vote about this person in 2021, but since then, SIPFA straightened their position that they actually want councils to have this person?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Nestroff. Yes, I think, as I say, in this report, we're just providing an update of what's happened since 2021, and of course, SIPFA have provided that additional guidance in 2022, and obviously, you know, we feel that their kind of position is obviously a stronger position than it was back in 2021. So it's just to give you as a committee that information from SIPFA, really, that they are, you know, really encouraging councils to do this now. Thank you.
Councillor Hepwell.
Just quickly, I'm struggling with independence. I mean, we're all independent. We're not employed by the council. We're here to represent the people. We are independent people that can criticise officers for what they do and what they don't. So I don't understand why this independent person is any more independent than the councillors that are elected every 4 years. So I really struggle with that. I'm sorry.
I think that's the point. They're not elected and they stand independent and not representing a party that they are elected by. I think that's the whole thing about them being independent. They may have political views, but they don't come to the table here, whereas we are affiliated to distinct political parties, and I think that's the definition of independent as far as SIPFA is concerned.
If I may, Madam Chair, that's why we're here. We have been elected by the people of Medway to look after their interests in the best way that we possibly can. And if we appoint somebody else to this committee or the council, they do not have that democratic mandate that we have. And I worry that that democratic mandate is being slowly undermined. Democracy is something that's quite precious. It's could be guided, and if you say, right, well, it's just as well have non-elected people coming in to the party as well. So why go through the democratic process? So I firmly believe that we've taken on this role. And it's our duty, and we are paid for it, not very much, I hasten to add, if anybody's listening. But we are paid for it, it's our duty to do it, and the buck stops with us. The buck stops with the elected members. It doesn't stop with officers, it doesn't stop with anybody else. It stops with the elected members. And I think to have the elected members undermined is not a good step. Thank you.
Phil, would you like to come in on that?
Yes, thank you. So the way Wayne has articulated this is absolutely right. We've brought this back because CIPFA has strengthened its guidance, and in so doing, it has said councils should have independent members. Right? But that is it's still guidance. It's not, mandating it. But they have strengthened their position on this in that 22 statement. In terms of the point around independence, and you talk about you've been elected democratically, Audit Committee is different from other committees in that it's meant to be non-political. It's about scrutinising the financial position of the council from a very objective point of view. And I think where CIPFA come from is and I'd welcome Darren's views if he doesn't mind in a few minutes as well. Where CIPFA are coming from is a presumption that the people on Audit Committee, the elected members on Audit Committee, are essentially laymen, and that by introducing an independent member, you can introduce an expertise and a skill set that might not be present. Now, the CIPFA guidance recognises that when you're appointing that member, that independent member, you need to take into account the skill set that you've got round the table already. It does recognise that. But I just wanted to make those points. I'm not positioning myself one way or the other. I'm just making it clear that this is CIPFA's strength and position, and they are suggesting that local authorities should have independent members on them.
But all I can say, so I can give you the reasons that CIPFA quoted for strengthening its position, and you as a committee will need to judge the relative merits and strength of those reasons. So it gives 3 reasons, and Phil's mentioned one of them at least. It's to supplement the knowledge and experience of elected members in specific areas such as financial reporting or treasury management. It's to provide continuity outside the political cycle, and it's to help achieve a non-political focus on governance, risk and control matters. So that's its rationale. I think the argument's fairly balanced as to whether an authority should have an independent member, and the stats that on the covering report make it clear it's fairly balanced. You'll know yourself as an audit committee the way you conduct business, whether it is non-political, whether or not an independent member would help or aid in that situation, whether you have a skills gap that someone could help plug. Those are just questions you need to ask yourselves before reaching your decision, I would have thought.
Thank you, Darren. That's very helpful. And those have been questions that some of us have been struggling with to get to the point for tonight. Is there any more questions before I ask the Vice Chair to read one of the recommendations and we can vote with a vote on it? Anybody? Okay, thanks.
I move recommendation 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3 at page 19, that the committee recommends to council that an independent member be appointed to serve on the committee on a fully non-voting basis, or with a vote except on any matter which involves the control or regulation of the council's finances.
I think we're voting on 1.1, folks.
I think, yeah.
And is that just on a fully non-voting basis only?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, members.
Sorry.
All those in favour? Sorry, all those against? The motion is carried. That means 1.2 and 1.3 fall. I beg your pardon, I'm totally wrong in that. I've just been advised. So 1.2, the committee recommended to full council to ask the independent remuneration panel to consider whether payment of an allowance to an independent member would be appropriate. And I think, bearing in mind we had discussions on this, there would be advice going to them as to the opinion that was outlined tonight, and at what level to make the recommendations back to council on the matter. But that's for the independent remuneration panel to make back. And the committee agreed that a further report to the recruitment process of an independent member be submitted to the next meeting once council has approved the principle of appointing an independent member of the committee. And just for information, in other places that's been usually done by the chair of audit and a member from the committee. So I would be hoping that we'd be, if we're going forward, that we would do that in a normal collegiate manner that we do stuff.
I think we'll have to beg to differ on this particular issue, but yes, we will be collegiate going forward, I can assure you.
And do I have to read any more?
No, so we have agreement on 1.2 and 1.3, I think. Okay, thank you.
I now move to item 7, which is the Treasury Management Strategy Mid-Cycle Review Report for 23-24. And this one's over to Andy, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I'd like to say there is a correction to paragraph 6.8 on page 39. It is incorrect to say, as it did in the report, that net expenditure will remain within budget. Round 2 forecast is forecasting an underspend of 1.661 million, which is an improvement of 802,000 from the position reported at round 1. This is both due to an increase in the forecast interest earned from investments and a reduction in the forecast of interest paid, which is due to new borrowing not happening as fast as previously envisaged. I do apologise for that error in the report. Now, this report gives an overview of the Treasury management activity since April 2023 and follows on from the Q1 report, which was presented to this committee on the 28th of September. Just a few points I'd like to raise. The top table on page 33 shows we're projected to be under borrowed against the capital financing requirement. That is using the latest projections for capital expenditure, those being at round 2, and the projected borrowing need. And as was said earlier on, if we are under borrowed, it shows we're only borrowing for capital purposes, which is obviously, as statute, what should happen. We are saying in the report, and this was alluded to earlier on, really, that we are continuing to the need to try and smooth our maturity profile, and we speak about that, how we have a large repayment to do. We will be looking at that, how we refinance some of those, and as was suggested earlier on, we'll be looking perhaps at the 2-3 years with a view of looking at interest rates, and as we've got more certainty, when we're taking a different view, and obviously the Treasury strategy will continue with that when you receive that, and it will give further updates as we know going into the future. So with that reported short-term borrowing, which we had of 94.5 million as at the 31st of March 23, the report states that just about £32.5 million remained repayable by the 31st of March 2024. That's also shown in the profile graph at paragraph 5.8. These changes are a result of a combination of repayment and replacement of loans as they have matured. We still aim to keep borrowing as low as possible, which means that cash invested will also be low as well. Also worth saying, details of our investments are detailed at 6.3 and 6.4. Benchmarking shows that we're in line with expectations, but doesn't include property funds. Obviously, property funds are, at this current point in time, not doing quite as well as they have done. But with regards to that, I suppose we need to take a view of how they've performed in the past as well. And what we are saying really with regards to the dividends, they are still doing okay for us at the moment, especially combined with capital values. So when I mentioned the benchmarking, there is a graph in paragraph 6.10.1 on page 39, and in there Medway is shown as the heavier rightmost mark just above the red line on there. So as you can say, it's within what we call the tram lines, so we are in with them what would be expected there. So as per paragraph 7.1, no debt rescheduling is anticipated this financial year, but we will obviously monitor the situation, and where opportunities arise, they'll be carefully considered. I'm happy to take questions, but you will recognise that our regular expert is not with me tonight, but I'll do my best to answer them. If I am unable to answer them, I will get them answered in writing to you as soon as I can. So yes, happy to try and take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I open the floor to questions. Councillor Hackwell, you get to go first this time.
Yeah. Thank you. Andy, I'm a bit concerned about the Lothbury or property fund, and I just really want to understand that if the worst happens and we have to find that extra 1.05 million to be recognised in our revenue account, is that already in the 12 million projected overspend, or will that be added to the 12 million? You missed that, didn't you?
Sorry, the question again, please.
Sorry, the question for if the Lothbury fund, we have to, the worst happens and we have to add 1 million to the revenue account, is that already in the 12 million? Or will the 12 million become 13 million if...
It would be a further pressure that we haven't taken into account.
Okay.
We at the moment, they're still trying to secure this merger, and we were asked as investors to vote on a deferral of the decision to close it, which we've obviously voted in favour of while they try and secure this merger. But yeah, ultimately, if it folds and we have to take a £1 million hit, that's not reflected in our forecast at the moment.
Sorry, Phil, can we just ask, why is it appearing in the revenue budget if it's a capital investment? Or if this is an investment, why is it hitting the revenue budget for £1 million? If it's wound up, why do we have to find the million? Because we didn't incur the debt of the company that's folding.
So when we talk about a capital investment, we're not talking about the capital programme.
No, I understand that.
and any loss on this investment is a hit to the revenue budget. At the moment, all the time it's just a paper loss. There's a statutory override in place, which means we don't have to take that hit on the revenue budget. But as soon as it crystallises, which it would do if the fund was to go under, then we'd have to take that hit on the revenue budget.
If they decide to do it in stages, do we get hit for the million in stages as well?
I don't know, to be honest.
Thanks. Councillor Colvin?
Yes, on the property investments. First of all, I've made this point before, but whilst on the table it says interest is non-applicable, but there is a yield, and I think it would only be right that that yield is put in the table. As far as where the losses bear, it is very an academic bit of accounting, but certainly I think we're in the banking industry where they've had to market for bond assets and the like. It's actually exacerbated the situation, because the value of at any point of time is only what that would be on that day, and if you've got no intention of selling that asset, that loss should not be on your books. But it's very difficult, but it is unfortunately it's a very common thing in finance, and it's something I struggle to get my head around, why we insist on marking to market, because I think that's exacerbated considerably the financial crisis. Just the other thing, going back to where we've got to funds, we've got, as rightly pointed out, this year's fine, but next year and the year after we've got some really big humps in that debt maturity profile, and I think that the plan of perhaps splitting that between short-term and long-term would be a very sensible approach. I mean, we haven't got to do it straight away, but I think it would be a good exercise, perhaps to sort of do various scenarios of what interest rates are likely to do over those, and see which would give the best sort of profile going forward. I mean, to just refinance all that in one go to one position, I think would possibly be too much of a gamble. I'd personally rather take a very cautious approach, and have some of it short term, some medium term, but some long, and that's I think that would spread our risk. But I think because it is such a big lump, particularly that in 25, I think it's something we have got to take a long, hard think about. And I wonder how officers feel about having that sort of risk knowing. I think certainly Richard earlier this evening would be more than capable of giving us some advice on that. Thank you.
Andy, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, thank you. I think we'll obviously look at all options, but what we're trying to do at the moment is with the view, and it was obviously raised earlier, that we are looking in a couple of years for interest rates to start coming down. That will obviously flow through to an extent on longer term, and what we don't want to do is lock ourselves into a long-term borrowing, which actually in a couple of years' time we could borrow long-term at a lower rate. So that's why we're looking for the shorter term. We're looking at shorter periods for now, with a view that we'll review all of that as the economics determine. But obviously, yeah, we'll look at all options, and we'll review that in line with working with our advisors link, and obviously with members as well. We'll take views along on that, and that will come out in our annual Treasury strategy for next year and future years.
Any other member? Thank you. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back on the property funds, we see that we've got a 2 million loss on the valuation now. I guess like many other funds go up and down and all the rest of it. Over the, what was it, 7 years that 7 or 8 or 6 or 7 years that's been invested, is this just a short-term blip, or has it been going down 500,000 every year for the last 7 years? So I just really want to, because I mean, at any time you take a picture, you can paint a different story. So it could be just a blip in time, but I'd just like to understand it a bit more.
Phil.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's worth noting that when we took the funds out in the first place, there was automatically a built-in loss because there's a spread between bid and offer. So the minute you take them out, if we then redeem them straight away, then you've lost money. We did get to a position where they had the capital appreciation had taken them above that spread. So yes, I think it is the current economic conditions that have manifested in this loss at the moment. Now, from the presentation that we had earlier today, our Treasury advisors are clearly saying hold your nerve. Now, that's unfortunate with the Lothbury one. I mean, I think my view was always these were a long-term play. We didn't take a significant investment because I didn't want to be in a position where I had lots of cash that I might need to liquidate at a time that I didn't want to. But obviously, when something happens to one of the funds, as it has with Lothbury, then that's the risk that you take. But I am inclined, based on the advice from our Treasury advisors, to hold firm and allow the fund to recover.
Councillor Nestor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say my views on the matter as well. First, about the maturing of loans. For me personally, it seems the more sensible way to go is to get short-term loans, because like Mr. McNally said, if we lock ourselves with the long-term loans that are 5% and the percentage, the bank rate goes down, we could end up paying much more in the long term. So just for me, it's more sensible to have short-term loans now. And about the property fund, yeah, it is unfortunate that Wardbury issue a notice of termination. But in terms of property funds per se, I think if the bank rate goes down and mortgages and loans in general cost less, property funds will go up. So we'll make some money in the long term as well. So that's my personal views. Yeah.
Phil.
So just to reiterate what you've said, what members have said, and what Andy said earlier, and what our advisor said to us earlier. If you look at the table at 5.7, it shows that the projections for the interest rate are to come down quite significantly over the next 2 years, which is why I absolutely endorse the approach of taking short-term loans. I mean, I would be looking at 2 to 3 years. However, the only thing I would say is that we have been embarking on a strategy of trying to smooth our maturity profile. So we will take a series of loans, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years initially, just so that we're starting to spread that maturity profile. But we'll wait until the interest rate drops by that couple of percent before we start taking any more longer than that.
That's the point, Phil, I was trying to make. We need to try and play that scenarios to what that short-term versus medium-term, how it would work out, and perhaps put some various interest rates, because whilst we, as Richard said, this is not set in stone, I think we should have a look at slightly different scenarios as well, just to make sure that we feel we're comfortable with it.
Any other member? Okay. I've just got a couple of points I'd like to make. Firstly, thanks for the report. Thank you to Jonathan. Thank you to the team. We have dividends coming in from the investments that we've made in the property funds. Long may that continue, and hopefully maybe it'll be a little bit more. Yeah, it's like being in negative equity. Hold your nerve, folks. It usually comes right. The old adage, you know, of these things. It's not as if we are actually betting on a racehorse that's going to break its leg tomorrow or something like that. So let's thank everybody for that. And our professional advisors have, and I think around this table we have pretty much agreed with the landscape as they have portrayed it. And this committee has always been, as long as I've been involved in it, and I'm sure that there are people around this table who can vouch for it going back a bit further, has always said, let's take a mixed approach. Let's be as cautious as we need to be and as adventurous as we have to be, rather than the other way around. And then the other thing that I think we should recognise as a committee is that we have officers who have done us proud in telling it as it is, and we have professional advisors that, as far as I can see, are giving us the kind of advice that fits in with our strategy. And I look forward to us sticking with whatever strategy that we come up with. But at the moment, we're well within the strategy. It's given us a reasonable comfort, as much as anybody can have a reasonable comfort in the last 2 or 3 years, especially with what's been happening on the FTSE and other places. So I would thank everybody for their efforts in this and for all the comments that have come around the table. I concur with the mixture of short and medium term, but moving, as Phil says, we do have to try and just smooth that out. But I'm sure with the help of our external advisors and the good diligence of our officers, I think we will achieve that. Thank you. I hand over to the Vice Chair.
I move recommendation 1.1 at page 35 that the committee considered the report, noted its contents and noted that the report will also be referred to Cabinet and full Council.
Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Happily, the meeting is now closed.